Good morning and welcome to this special one-off show to mark Mental Health Awareness Week. I'm your host, Mark Anthony, and as I'm sure you're aware, we do have a very special guest joining us today, and I can see him lurking in our green room, and he's chomping at the bit to be part of the discussion. Before I press the button to bring him on, I wanted to give you a bit of context. If you were here earlier in the week, or if you've been reading demolitionnews.com, you will know that there is currently a display of 454 hard hats littering the floor of the Leeds College of Building. Those hard hats haven't been left behind by lazy students. They are there to represent the number of construction and demolition workers that take their own lives in a typical year. Construction and demolition workers are committing suicide at a rate of around 9 per week. That's 3 times the national average. Here to discuss this is award-winning builder and broadcaster Andy Stevens. Andy runs his own building company, Eclipse Property Solutions, which has won several awards for outstanding craftsmanship. And he was also the Vice President of the London region of the Federation of Master Builders, where he was on the board for nearly a decade. He's produced and presented his own radio show, which means he's probably better at this sort of thing than I am. And he's also just finished presenting a weekly live show for OnTheTools, which has over 4 million viewers. 4 million viewers, if only. He also hosts his own weekly podcast called Build It, which covers everything in the construction industry in his own inimitable style. But none of that is really why he's here. The main reason for Andy joining us is that he's working as an ambassador for both the Construction Industry Training Board and the Lighthouse Club construction charity, looking specifically at the subject of mental health awareness. Let's get him on the show. Good morning, Andy.
Morning. How are you?
I'm very well. I do appreciate you joining us today. I wish it was to discuss something a little more cheerful. But before we get to the serious stuff, how does a hands-on builder wind up with his own radio show and podcast?
Well, it was probably about 5-6 years ago. I was asked to go and do a casting for a TV ad, and to do with construction. So I went along, got it, and then it sort of spiraled from there, being quite open, honest, outward spoken, and obviously been in the industry quite a few years. It's led to all sorts of media work. So I filmed for a lot of the companies. I had a day yesterday with Home Building Renovating magazine doing a new series on tool advice for self-builders. Worked with Leyland Paints last week, Tool Station, and it's not just all about that and the exhibitions and the magazines and everything I work for. It's also about raising awareness of mental health. My 2 big things in construction are mental health and apprenticeships, both of which are nowhere near where they need to be. And the reason I'm doing a lot on mental health is because I went through a horrendous journey, and pretty much came to the end of everything. And as Alan Partridge said, bounce back, and seeing, unfortunately, your figures are more positive than they should be. It's over 2 people a day in construction and demolition that take their own life, more so than any other industry in the UK. And those figures were pre-COVID, so we're waiting for ONS to come out. They're going to be even worse. So very sadly, as we were just saying off air, we're only talking about this because someone's labelled this Mental Health Awareness Week. We should be talking about this a lot more often, but it starts us somewhere.
You have been very open about your own mental health issues. For those that don't know, take me back to what those issues were and really how they manifested themselves.
Yeah, so I'm 45 years old, and obviously when you're growing up in the 70s and 80s, things were different to they are now, and I fully respect that. But I knew things weren't right. Relationships were failing. I was struggling with the business, and there's something up. So a friend of mine sort of had been through a similar thing, and I went and spoke to a private specialist in central London, a trauma centre, and got diagnosed with complex PTSD, anxiety and depression. And that stemmed from child abuse. And I will emphasise it was only physical. And at the time, you don't think anything of it. But, the punches and the hits and the blood and knives and forks being stuck in the back of your hand because you couldn't hold your cutlery properly. All these things kind of stick in your mind. And listen, I'm not going to lie, they affect you big time. When I got that diagnosis, you then think, well, you either float along moaning, not getting anywhere, blaming others, or do something about it. And then as I started courses, my marriage fell apart. and so this was about 4 years ago now, and got pushed to the limit through a very very nasty ex-partner, which can't say too much on because it's still in legal hands. But I was pushed to the edge, and again, in a sense, I'm not proud to say this, but I want to talk about it because I want people to listen and go, do you know what? If he can talk about it, then I can. You know, I'm a 6'3" ex-rugby player, physically not a problem with anything. Mentally, it's been torture. And then when you wake up in hospital with a mental health team around you, not knowing how you got there, the ambulance got to me just in time. Right, it's sink or swim.
So, I mean, you said that your issues pushed you to the edge. They pushed you, literally tipped you over the edge by the sound of things.
Yeah, I didn't drink. I don't do drugs. I was sitting in a house where I was sort of living because I was unlawfully made homeless from the family home. Don't remember what happened. Obviously, I went into some sort of haze. I was suffering badly, and the ambulance people say they got there. I must have called a number. I don't know who it was, if it was mental health charity or Samaritans. I don't know. But the ambulance said that you were sitting there with a kitchen knife. I don't remember that.
Wow. Now, I mean, obviously, you've mentioned the fact, of your abuse as a child and problems with marriage and that kind of thing. But I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to speak to you, obviously, you work very, very closely, you're very hands-on within the construction industry, and the construction industry always strikes me as a bit of a perfect storm in terms of mental health issues. You know, we're a lot of people are forced to work away from home for a long period of time. You know, they're separated from family and friends and their support network. They don't get to see their GP as often as they are. Some of them turn to drink and, as you mentioned, drugs to sort of get them through the rigors of the day. We keep addressing this issue of mental health awareness, but that's not actually addressing a lot of the causes of those mental health problems, is it?
No, construction often, a lot of people say, why is construction so bad with these figures? And well, there's a few reasons. You touched on one. A lot of workers can be away from the families for a long time, which is not good mentally whatsoever. Another thing is when you're self-employed. So I've got a small building firm. It's very hard when you get knocked. I've been knocked far too much over the years. Probably some of it's down to me because I'm not great with paperwork, and I'm learning through that. But the other stresses are, you get your van nicked or your tools nicked, which has now just gone out of control the last few years. I've heard from some powers that be that it's an organised national crime gang. I would have my tools nicked here, and then two weeks later they're on a tarp out the back of a hire van at a car boot in Devon, or they're shipped to Ireland or Eastern Europe. That's a big problem. The other thing, which I smile about, because 92% of us trades will be self-employed at some stage of their career. Now, not all of us stay in that type of employment, but we're not given any help on how to run a business, set up a business, payment schedules, contracts, how to price a job. I mean, I'm still learning. I'm 45, and these are the things that you've got to suck it and see. Construction 7.5% of GDP. We're a bloody big industry. We're the only industry that kept going through COVID, and we need a bit more help. I think it's as simple as that. Blokes are shit at talking. Women are brilliant, over brilliant, but us men aren't good. And I always say, are you going to get a 6'5" scaffolder covered in tats and a skinhead that loves to tear up in the pub on a Friday night, coming to work on Monday and go, lads, I'm struggling mentally? No, you'll more than likely find him swinging from the rafters, and it's something's got to be done.
So there you are. I mean, you've been very close to that. You've seen it up close and personal. What do we do? Is awareness enough? Is talking about? One of my concerns with this is the fact that the conversation seems to be taking place at a top level. You've got directors, which we will come on to, but you've got directors of major companies that are talking about this and doing some very good work. I have to say, hats off to them. They're doing some very good work. But is that filtering down? Are the lads on site now starting to talk about this, or have we still got a long way to go?
It's a really good question. There isn't, sadly, a yes or no answer. My concern is your big companies, and I had a friend that worked for the Kier Group a few years ago that went through an awful journey mentally, and he got the best support for him and his family. And I I was overjoyed to hear it. What do we do as micro and small business owners with 5, 12 staff, because we don't have the time, money, or resource to deal with one of the team that could be struggling? And I think what needs to be done is, I want to look at government. It's all very well and good talking about this, but what are you doing? Big media owners are jumping on with a logo, Mental Health Awareness Week. There's these federations and trade bodies jumping on it. It's great talking about it, but also let's get something done. And when the CITB called me for an interview last week and sort of said, "Oh, we're seeing great progress," and I said, "It's bollocks. How can 2 people a day taking their own life in construction be a success? Someone's lost a dad, a son, a brother, a neighbour." And we've got to look at the smaller and micro businesses, one-man bands that need the help, because the ones that are on the tools, in my opinion, if you're on a site, a residential build, converting an office, on the railways, that's the backbone of construction. They're the ones that need help.
The fact that you just mentioned one-man bands really does chime with me. I mean, I've spoken about this before. I've had 2 sessions on what I refer to as happy pills. I've had a couple of wobbles over the years, and a lot of mine stemmed, I guess, from a feeling of loneliness. I'm happily married, got 4 children, 3 of which still live at home. Surrounded by family, both parents still alive, and yet I got myself into a situation where I didn't think I could talk to anyone. And I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but this idea of perhaps being a burden on my family. So the last thing you want to do is to burden that family with those problems. That's even worse, I think, if you are, like you say, an SME, or even worse still, a one-man band working alone. You've literally got nobody to turn to, have you?
You haven't. And what you do, or a lot of people do, men and women, you go to work and escape. And when you've not been able to go to work because of COVID or lockdown or redundancies or furlough, you're stuck in an environment that is tough. And a lot of us go to work for a crack with your mates. And I always say that, most jobs I've been on, we have a really good laugh. Don't get me wrong, we graft hard, but you do have a good laugh. And not having that and suddenly being stuck indoors in 4 walls in an environment which can test you mentally or be difficult, it's not been good. And what you said earlier, I think it is good that we've got a lot of people speaking out, but Mental Health Awareness Week, it's a bit wrong. We need to be talking about this more than just a week.
The crazy thing is, and we've got a track record here. I publish annually, much as the Health and Safety Executive does, much as a lot of the wider media does. The Health and Safety Executive publish their accident report once a year. And we all get awfully excited and animated about the fact that somewhere between 35 and 45 people have died in construction and demolition over a particular year. We only speak about it once a year, and we get awfully excited about 35 to 45. And that, as you've just said, we're talking about close on 500, if not more, dying at their own hands. And yet we devoted a week to it, and then we will go back to our day jobs and not talk about it again until May next year. The maths just doesn't stack up, does it?
It doesn't stack up. And this is, if you walked into work tomorrow with a plaster cast on your leg, on crutches, you'd have people bending over backwards for you. If you walked into a supermarket or a shopping centre with a cast, and people would be opening doors, asking how you are, helping you. Problem with mental health, you can't see it. That's a big issue. And, as we sort of touched upon earlier, us men are pretty crap at opening up and talking. And that's one of the big hurdles we've got, is men mainly feeling it, I suppose the word normal, to better open up on a big site, on a residential build, working on the roads, whatever they're doing, and actually not be feared of being looked at in a bad way, that they could be told to bugger off, we'll get someone else on the job, to be seen as weak, and also to not have work colleagues, take the piss out of you. Because I know there's been a lot of, I hate the word celebrities, but well-known people coming out and talking about their struggles, which has helped drop the stigma, but we're still a long way off from it being perceived as normal. If you break your leg, perfectly normal. If you get diagnosed with depression and anxiety, people call you mental. I still think there's a long way to go to getting perception changed.
That weakness that you just mentioned, I think, is a real key driver here, because we are in an industry. I think we're all enjoying a bit of a boom at the moment, and long may it continue. But there is always that threat of job security, and the fact that you might not have a job next week. And I think if you're showing any signs of weakness, physical or more specifically mental, there is a possibility that you could be very, very easily replaced. That's one of the key bits that we need to address, isn't it?
It is. My question, and I always like to sort of put this back to people that I talk with, is where do we start with this issue? We briefly mentioned off air that it does wind me up a bit that media owners and federations jump on the bandwagon, and then come Monday next week, when it's another awareness week, they're gone. They're not talking about it. We need to talk about this more often, but would you agree that this needs to start as high up as government, because federations are doing bugger all, aren't they?
I totally agree, and in absolute truth, when you look at everything that happens within construction, unless somebody legislates, we don't do things. We don't innovate to that degree. I think we innovate in terms of methodologies and in terms of the equipment that we use and that kind of thing. But when it comes to things like, as a random example, environment, we will not address the issue of emissions unless the government slaps us and says you need to address that. And I've got a horrible feeling we're in exactly the same situation when it comes to mental health awareness, and in the way that we employ people. We've got this sort of multi-layered system within construction. Your main contractors and your specialists and your subcontractors and sub-subcontractors, and Lord alone knows what else. And I think if you're you as an example, you're at the very bottom of that ladder. Somebody clicks their fingers a million miles away, you're out of work. You're not there anymore. And I think that is constantly threatening people within the construction industry, demolition industry, plant hire, right across the board.
Well, another thing which I find, and I do like talking about this, because it's great to hear other people's views and thoughts. And one thing, if you want to join a federation, for example, they'll come and inspect your work and get references and make sure that you work in a safe environment. They never even speak to you about how you look after staff. You could have the best end product with the best references, but you could have had 7 of your staff take their own life over the last decade. Is that ever looked at? I find that staggering. The health and safety side, tick box, as it should be. Obviously, the quality of your work, yes. But how about how you look after staff? Why are you pushing them, forcing them to do 7 days a week or do long hours with no overtime, and putting them under pressure? If they don't do this, they're going to lose their job. Oh, I'm having troubles at home. Tough shit, mate. Get on with it. We're going to get someone else. Don't you think that's just as important as everything else when looking at a company?
100%. I mean, obviously, I spend a lot of my time writing about and talking about demolition, and we have a system here called the Site Audit Scheme within the National Federation of Demolition Contractors. And in terms of what I would term normal health and safety, they'll go along and they'll look at it, make sure everyone's wearing their PPE, they've all got their hard hats and their site boots, the scaffolding is erected properly and everything else. But no, you're dead right. That question isn't being asked, and that question, as we've said a number of times now, is probably 10 times more likely to kill someone than the lack of a hard hat.
Well, this is it. But I always find it staggering that 2021, we are here and we're still talking about it like it's for the first time. It's interesting. Nick Drews said a comment. Sorry, it's a bit like doing my live show. But I think it's brilliant that someone like Nick can say that he's had dark thoughts when he lost his business. Do you know what? The non-paying customers is awful. I'm going to be honest. I've been knocked 107 grand over the last 10 years, and the company's struggling. Even though we're boom, 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 the company's struggling. And these are people that, it's not an issue with the work. They'll look you in the eye and go, take me to court. And that's another side, the financial side, can give you a lot of mental health problems because you're struggling to pay your men every Friday. You get your suppliers that you've got to pay every month off on your account. Financial pressure can lead a lot to financial downturns, but that'll lead on to bad mental health. And I don't think there's enough support, again, for small businesses. The average tradesperson, demo person, ground worker, whatever, that gets knocked a couple of grand on a job, the majority of us, sadly, haven't got the time, money, or resource or mental health capacity to chase that. And I think people know it.
And that is precisely the sort of thing that government could legislate. I know, I've written about this quite a lot. We've had Build UK, a collective of some of the UK's biggest construction companies, some real big household names there. And they signed up to a charter that said that they would pay on time. And then within 12 months, they did a survey of their own members and found that not a one of them had actually done it. How is that being allowed to continue? And I realise that Build UK and some of these major companies, because we are such a large part of GDP, I realise we have the ear of government and we have a very strong lobbying voice. But we're lobbying for the wrong thing. We're basically lobbying for the right to not pay people on time and put them in mental health issues.
We need more help from government, 100%. Even legislation being put in place, is that honestly going to work? Personally, I think it will help, but it won't make a huge difference. It stems back to one thing, and that's perception. When you're at school, I was told you go to university, get a degree and become successful in life, or you fail and you go and dig a hole and get dirty. And I'd like to say that I can put two fingers up to them and saying I'm doing all right, but still, my kids at 7 and 8 are pretty much told that as well. The perception's got to change. It's a bloody good industry, this. You don't have to be on the tools. You can go into, health and safety, site management, architecture, structural engineers, buying. You can work your way up in organisations, onto the board. There's a lot of opportunity. Go into training, work in colleges. There's such a great sort of level of work to do away from just being on the tools. And I think that's the perception we've got wrong. I find it staggering that today, my neighbour, she's just had twins, could be a bricklayer tomorrow morning on a job, or a spread, or a chippy. We're not licensed. That's a huge issue. You look at Germany. I had a friend that went over there and was spreading for 14 years. He went to some sort of posh drinks do one evening, surrounded by doctors, solicitors. He was regarded on the same level as them. And I smiled and thought, that's spot on, Germany. Fair play. Because at the end of the day, you look at all the amazing structures, buildings in this country. We built them with our hands. That's the bottom line. We built them. That is a skill set. And we should be respected on the same level as doctors, solicitors, and everything else, because it's an amazing skill to have, and not many people can do it.
I totally agree, and I'm fairly sure our audience will agree wholeheartedly with that. You alluded to this earlier. Obviously, we are coming very close now to the end of lockdown. But even though a lot of the construction industry was granted key worker status and was allowed to sort of soldier on throughout, there will be a lot of people that were stuck at home and not, as you described it earlier, having the crack with their mates and that kind of thing. Are we likely to see another spike in mental health issues that we can trace back to the lockdown, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think you're right. Obviously, we were back to work, send them in. But residentially, a lot of work was halted or delayed because people at home that weren't in offices or elsewhere with work didn't want the risk in their house. So extensions, refurbs, bathrooms, kitchens, a lot of that was put on pause. Which meant people were furloughed or lost their job or weren't getting paid because they weren't working. So that will add on to it. And I think there will be a big spike. ONS are obviously focusing on figures with COVID, but when we get the suicide numbers in construction, I think it's going to be even worse. And we need to be doing more than 1 week a year as an awareness week. And, I'll say it again, we need to get federations, bodies, government, media owners with responsibility to actually do something about it and not just jump on the bandwagon.
That key worker status, I think, it was like a double-edged sword. As somebody that takes their living from demolition and construction, I was, obviously pleased to see companies being allowed to continue. But every day I was sat there watching Boris Johnson and Chris Whitty and all these people talking about the potential dangers that were lurking outside if we went out, and yet construction was just told, crack on, lads. Yes, there is a pandemic out there. Yes, we are killing 1,000 people a day, but you crack on, you'll be fine. Given that we're talking about mental health awareness, you've got potential problems of loneliness, you've got potential problems of job security and of finance, and then heaped on top of that is the fear of I've still got to go to work in the midst of a pandemic. That's not making the situation any better at all, is it?
No, it's not. And a couple of things. I actually got COVID March last year, and I had a day and a half in the local hospital, but it wasn't too bad. I only had a mask, not a ventilator, but still suffering a bit now with sort of chest and stuff. But listen, people got it a lot worse. But when I went back to work, and this is what government, I was raging, a bit like you, watching Boris, come out with the latest updates and guidelines, just thinking, you haven't got a Scooby-Doo, mate. Now, I was doing a residential refurb in London at the time, and we were on a ground floor in a terraced Victorian property, and part of the brief was we had to insulate for noise, not thermal, for noise from the upstairs. And there was one option which we agreed, which I still think is a good option, and that was obviously pack the rafters with Rockwool or similar, brand, and then use a soundboard for acoustics. Now these soundboards are 54 kilos, and then, as we all know, they're 8 foot long by 4 foot wide. Now, you're not going to be able to do that on your own with a 2 meter distance. There was actually 3 of us, 2 of us lifting and the other fitting it. There's no way we could keep to 2 meter guidelines. Scaffolding with a 1 meter wide, lift. What are you going to do? Levitate to go around someone at 2 meters? And then the other stuff, site work. I had a lad phone me, he contacted me on social media and said he was going in with 3,000 others, and you had to sign a waiver to say we're not holding the company responsible if I contract COVID or you lose your job. But they're all signing it with the same pencil. I just found it staggering.
Yeah, that's the message really not getting through, isn't it? We are getting to the end of the show now, Andy. I'm sure you've got better things to be doing. But one of the things that struck me when I first heard your story, as a dog lover myself, you found a degree of salvation in a slightly unusual way. What was that salvation?
Well, I ended up in a property, luckily, that a friend owned, because I didn't have anywhere to live at the time. And the kids desperately wanted a dog, and the ex would never get one. And I decided to get a puppy, so I did a lot of research on what the right dog was, and ended up, luckily, not too far away, got a 8-week-old working Cocker Spaniel, and went and saw the 7 in the litter when they were about 4 or 5 weeks. And I said to the kids, even though they picked this one, let's see what this one's like. It might be mad. And got there, and 6 were asleep, not bothered. The one they picked jumped into their arms from the cardboard box, and I thought, right, this is the one. And as I went to pick her up with them after 8 weeks, and obviously pay the man, as I was putting it in the car, he turned around and went, "You went, good luck, mate. She's the mad one." And she is. The only thing the kids have agreed on is the name, Millie. We call her Mad Millie Dog because she's absolutely mad. But what I didn't know until I bumped into a woman about a year ago in a coffee shop was working cockers. Her daughter actually trains them with ex-forces because they're sniffer dogs. They're very good with scents if you're struggling with mental health. And I didn't know this. You give off a scent, apparently. And if I've had a bad time or a trigger and I'm suffering a bit, Mad Millie Dog's on my lap all over me. And I tell you what, it's what was just a little gift to the kids has been a bit of a lifesaver, really.
Yeah, I can relate to the mad dog thing. I've got 2 boxer dogs, and they only do mad. There is no alternative, and unfortunately, I don't think they bother smelling anything aside from food. I mean, you've just mentioned the fact, you've mentioned triggers and that sort of thing. So, in some ways, you can kind of liken mental health issues with an addiction. I think you always hear alcoholics, I am in recovery, I'm not recovered. And I think certainly as I say, I mean, I've been down the path, and I know I look for the signs, and I know what the signs are. And in my case, it is sort of taking myself away from sort of friends and family and that kind of thing. And once I start doing that, I am reminded of the fact that I'm still not quite where I need to be. You're very open about the fact that you've been through it, but by the sound of it, you're also very aware of the fact that you're still going through it.
It never goes. Anyone that says it completely goes, I would disagree with. I appreciate we're all different. Interestingly, you use the word addiction. One of the lines I always use is mental health, in my opinion, is the same as an addiction. Until you admit you've got a problem, you can't move forward and get help. And different people get help at different times. And sadly, obviously, there's far too many that it's too late and don't get help. Listen, you have great days. You have brilliant days. I get a big job come in, or I'm doing a fundraiser for the Lighthouse Club, the construction industry charity, rebuilding a house, and having great fun, great days. Doing a lot of media work and really enjoying that. But then you get a trigger. You take 2 steps forward, and then you get a nasty email from the solicitor, from the ex-wife or something, and it's just a trigger, and it does set you back. And what you've got to realize is how to deal with these triggers. And as you said, some people take themselves away from friends and family, want time on their own. I always think the best thing is I grab the mad animal, go to some lovely woods nearby, and get out in nature and just go for a massive walk. And one thing with her, because she's such a fit dog that doesn't sit still, I can't get away when I never would dream of taking her for a 10-minute wander on a lead around the block. It's always an hour and a half, 2 hours in the woods or down by the river or wherever. And getting out in nature is a great way. And I think a big thing as well is not using your vices too much. Because listen, we've all got a vice. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be gambling, it could be anything. Be realistic. Don't say to yourself, I'm never ever going to not have a drink again or smoke a cigarette or whatever it is. But just be careful you don't become reliant on them, because then that's another problem and can be a very slippery slope. I think it's just learning that when you get a trigger of how to deal with it in a sensible way, the best thing for anybody, and it's free, is speaking. Bottling it up does not help anybody. It will make things 100 times worse. Mental pain is like a washing machine. It goes round and round and round and round with no off button. If you can take a step back, talk to a friend or family member, if you're lucky enough to have family, then that makes a huge difference. So don't forget, the 2 things, in my opinion, are getting out into nature. Doesn't cost to go for a walk, and speaking to friends and family also doesn't cost anything.
You've kind of preempted what is probably going to be my final question. I mean, you've been through the ringer personally. You're obviously speaking about it a lot now. A lot of the people that are watching this are not the government. They're not the legislators, and they're not the bosses of the big companies. They are the guys out on site. The digger drivers and the operatives and that kind of thing. Given the fact that you have been through the ringer, what would your advice be? And I know it's good to talk and all that, but what would be your personal advice to somebody that's watching this and thinking, yeah, I identify with that?
It's, no matter what I say, it's not going to be the right answer for everybody. I think from what I've been through, what friends have been through, people that have taken their own life, no matter how low you get, it does get better. And I keep telling myself that, even though I'll be honest, I don't always believe it. But when you are lowest of low, you're homeless, you've got no money, you've got no family, you've got no work, you're not eating, it's pretty shit. I'm not going to be ashamed. It wasn't that long ago I was relying off food banks. I didn't have anywhere to live or eat, and it's shit. But I tell you what, the positive side out of that, you come back stronger. You come back a lot stronger. It toughens you innerly and externally. You get this sort of core built up to deal with things in an easier manner. But I think the hardest thing for me, and luckily this laptop can't see my desk, it looks like someone's launched a grenade at it. My paperwork is dreadful. And the problem is, you look at a big pile of paperwork, because us trades are crap with paperwork, generally. I certainly am. And, where do I start? I've got bills, invoices. But just try and break it down. And I struggle with that. But, you think, right, what's urgent? Let's try and do that for 10 minutes today. I know that I'm busy tomorrow. I'm not going to do it tomorrow. Let's try and get another 15 minutes in a couple of days' time. Break it down step by step. And just when you're there, and I hope nobody is watching this that is there thinking I've had enough, pick the phone up. Pick the phone up. I'm lucky that I've got a very good friend that probably still speak to an hour a day. What two blokes talk about for an hour a day is beyond me. But at the time, it was it was what I was going through, and he'd been through it, so it was a big help. But pick the phone up. You've got the Lighthouse Club, the construction industry charity. You've got Mind. You've got a lot of mental health charities that are a good start. But it brings you tougher. It brings you a lot tougher. And I would say if you are really bad, it's actually, when I was there, all I could see was my two kids' faces, and I thought, I can't do it for them. And, I haven't got family apart from them, but, I would be letting quite a lot of other people down as well. So I think to yourself to reach out and talk, go for a big walk, and it does get better. Break it down, talk to someone, and try and do a bit of exercise. That's another free drug, endorphins and all the other bits and pieces that are released. I joined a gym just before lockdown last year, got about 7 to 8 weeks before it was shut, felt way better. I used to play rugby a lot and I missed it, really missed it. It's finding things that will give you a pick-me-up. And the big thing is, guys, don't be ashamed to admit it. I'm a 6'3" ex-rugby player. And if I go sideways, I've got a face like a kicked-in biscuit tin. I'm happy to stand here and talk about it. And quite honestly, I've stood in front of hundreds and thousands of people and told my story. And if there's one person that takes note and it helps them, tick, I've done my job.
I think that made more sense and had more resonance with me than just about any health and mental health awareness training and initiatives that I've seen in the past couple of years. So Andy, you are better qualified to be here than I am, because I'm a paper journalist. I don't normally do stuff to camera, although I have been for the last year out of necessity. Given the fact that you are all over social media and stuff, where is the best place for people to find out more about you and to reach out to speak to you?
Yeah, the @AndyStevensTV on Instagram. What I do is I'm tracking the charity build that we're doing for the Lighthouse Club. So that's obviously the best thing about it. There's no clients. We're having a good old laugh, grafting away, showing all being an old house, all the hilarious things we found. So that's on there. All the filming work I'm doing and media work, the mental health work, the talks that I'm doing on that is all on there. And being an open guy, there's the odd picture of the dog and 2 kids having fun. So it's quite an open account of my day-to-day sort of living. But mental health and apprenticeships are my 2 big things in this industry, and we've got to sort them out. It's as simple as that. If we don't sort them out, we won't have an industry. So it's weird being able to talk about it, having been where I was, but I now use that as a strength. And part of the recovery is helping others. And if someone picks up the phone, I had someone the other week contact me on social media, and I said, look, just call me. And it was great having a couple of hours, I think about 2 hours, 20 minutes conversation with him, and it helped him. And tell you what, I got a buzz from that. So yeah, I've been through it, but if it means I can help other people now, then happy days. It's we've got a long way to go. We have, but we will get there. Simple as that. Because don't forget, we're in the best industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, interestingly, you mentioned having a friend to turn to. There you go. There's Nick Drew saying exactly the same thing. Andy, look, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I really do appreciate you taking the time today. Fair play to you for coming clean on your own issues, and fair play for you for putting the time in to actually help others. Well, I'd love to get you back on at some point to talk about apprenticeships, which is it's another challenge, but maybe a little more cheery. So we'll get you back on at some point. But in the meantime, Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will add social media links to the description when we send this out as a recorded. But in the meantime, thanks ever so much for joining us.
No problem at all. It's great to come on and talk about it, and yeah, more than happy to come on again and working together, get this sorted moving forward.
Thanks ever so much, Andy. All the best.
Take care. Bye then.
Cheers. And there you are. And I really appreciate what Andy said there, and a lot of it really did resonate with me. And I think I'm going to leave this one up for a little while now, because I have touched on this before. Like a lot of people, I came back from the ConExpo show in March last year and was expected to be in lockdown for about 7 days. It turns out I was in lockdown for a year. Couldn't produce the magazine that I normally draw my income from. So I wasn't destitute, because I've got the website and I could keep that going. But I was forced to learn a new job, which is precisely the thing that I'm sat here doing at the moment. And it was genuinely the support of Peter Haddock and Nick Drew, who I spent a lot of time with in Las Vegas. We have an unofficial support network, I guess. That was never discussed. We never planned to do it, but when I've had bad days, one of them has phoned me up, and vice versa. It does work. It really does work. So, as I say, we've given you Andy's details. He is all over social media like a rash. Best to find him on LinkedIn or Instagram specifically. We will be posting this later today, within the next hour or so, as a recorded version. But in the meantime, I really appreciate you joining us. If you can share this with somebody that might get some value from it, please do so. But in the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching, and let's make this a constant conversation. If there's one thing I will take away from my discussion with Andy there, it's not Mental Health Awareness Week, it's Mental Health Awareness, full stop. Thanks for watching, thanks for taking part, and I'll see you all again very, very soon. All the best.